Today we're looking at the Enslaver Expert Advisor by Mr. Ihor. Ihor is a fellow YouTuber, and he's also made quite a few very popular EAs on the marketplace by now. So looking forward to diving into this one and see how it differs from some of his previous ones. This video is sponsored by our free Golden Time Bomb Expert Advisor. Take your trading to the next level through automating the London breakout and the opening range breakout. Click the link in the description to download the EA completely for free. So the Enslaver appears to be a mean reversion strategy primarily running on a basket of currencies. And he does seem to run more of these multi-asset EAs, which is something that I personally would agree with. So instead of running it just on like one pair and doing tons and tons of trades, what he's doing here is similar to what Wim did with the ultimate breakout system, where you essentially run and you give an EA that comes with a boatload of set files so that you can build your own portfolio. And this makes a lot of sense because you're able to really smooth an equity curve through essentially spreading the risk across multiple different assets. And if we look here, we can see that he's doing just that. And this is a quant analyzer backtest. You can see he has a bunch of little equity curves down here, which are stacking to give us this big blue one, which is a combined portfolio. So that's very logical. That's what I would do as well. And mean reversion on currencies can make a lot of sense too. Some of these assets are very mean reverting in terms of like just their price action behavior. Like the Aussie CAD, two commodity currencies together, they tend to move fairly sideways. Obviously the Euro Swiss franc also moves fairly sideways due to the kind of interdependence of the economies. But then some of these are a little bit more trending in nature. Like I'd be curious to see how the Euro USD did in more of like a trending market environment like this year with this type of system. And what he has a couple different modes here, one of which is single trade mode, which I believe is just like one entry, one stop loss, one take profit, no averaging in. And he has one that uses a slight martingale, so like a three trade mode where essentially it averages in up to 3 different levels. And what I think is quite smart, what he's doing here, is he's giving you some different options for the 3 trade mode versus the single trade mode. Namely, he's saying don't trade US dollar pairs if you're going to average in, which is really smart because if you try and trade any sort of like averaging in system on a USD pair, it can be pretty challenging. Just because the US dollar has such like massive news moves, like when CPI comes out or NFP comes out, you can have these big impulses, particularly in this the Trumpian market environment, you can have some really big moves. So all of that seems pretty smart. I believe he's saying it is a scalping system too. It runs on the M15. You don't need a lot of capital to start, so it can't be particularly martingale-y. He says it is FIFO compliant, which means that most likely he's referring to then like hedging and netting accounts. He might be referring to that more for the non-martingale system, or perhaps because even with a martingale, because you're always going in the same direction, it isn't like buy, sell, it's usually buy, or sell, sell. That could be working. Now we open up a couple of the signals here. So far so good. We have a few months of performance on the IC markets, and it is indeed trading a basket of different currency pairs. And if we look at the statistics here, we can see that it does actually have a positive risk reward with a very high win rate, which is interesting. Like that's very good. It is a pretty short signal, so I would assume if you run this over a long enough period of time, those statistics won't look as good, just because it's really hard to have both a super high win rate and a positive risk reward over a big enough sample size. It just gets pretty tricky. But I think this developer does know what he's doing, so it gives us some insight there. This is the 3 trade mode. I believe this is the one which is like a pseudo martingale, where he's kind of averaging in a certain way, but only with 3 trades, which is a bit more responsible. And once again, like we're seeing, it's a very short signal, but so far so good. So yeah, so far looking really impressive. Currency based, you do need to have a lot of different set files for this thing to work. And if you actually read his description up here and you go through it, I would highly recommend doing that before you backtest, because I initially tried to backtest just downloading it and put it on default settings. It did not work. So you would need to actually download the exact set files and run the backtest yourself. And this one particularly I ran on the Euro CHF, and I believe this is the non-martingale mode for around a year. And here it turned, or it made a very low, a low annual return, but I think this was with a very conservative risk setting. And in terms of the win rate, 86%, and with roughly a 1-to-1 risk reward. So that's very impressive. One thing to note is that this is a heavy indicator-based system. We're seeing moving averages, Bollinger Bands, RSIs, ATRs. So that's like a lot and lots of indicators, right? So if you have so many indicators, it's pretty easy to overfit a system. So while the performance has been very good, you should be aware that when you have so many indicators as a developer, it's incredibly easy to run 20 million optimizations and pick the best one. So just be mindful of that, and that you probably would want to do a bit more research in regards to his methodology and his approach, just to make sure that he's following best practices when actually developing these systems. And yeah, so far from what I can see, it's definitely an indicator-based filter and trigger, trading a mean reversion system on a whole basket of currency pairs. And it's an honest system. There's no signs of manipulation here. The one concern I would really have is overfitting. So you might want to see how the signal progresses over, let's say, a few more months to see how it performs. But this developer's had good results so far, so I don't see why it wouldn't, like he seems to be competent, right? So there's a higher probability that there's better future success. And apart from that, nothing super that stands out. Like maybe in terms of to touch on prop firms, it might be a bit more challenging to run on prop firms because any sort of more scalpy style system typically requires some slightly higher leverage. So if you're doing that, it might not work as well on a one phase, for instance, where you don't have as much leverage available to you. But apart from that, it's looking pretty solid. Good system, lots of different pairs. There is an overfitting risk, but it'd be worth digging a little bit more into depth in regards to that. But the portfolio approach is really smart, running many different pairs and kind of combining it to get that smoother equity curve. This style of system or mean reversion premise also makes a lot of sense on these types of assets. He's not trading any sort of particularly risky or kind of very trendy indice, for instance. And the 3-trade mode, where he's kind of doing a bit of averaging in, he is doing a slightly martingale approach, but he's taking a lower risk version of that by capping the amount of trades which are possible. Still to note that like if you do trigger all 3 trades, it would be maybe a heftier drawdown than what you would typically expect. But at least he's not allowing it to go to 8 different levels and blow the account. So he is being mindful there, and he is picking the right pairs. So it looks like, just to sum up, a well thought out system, trading assets that make sense, no direct manipulation seen, but be mindful of overfitting. There is a little bit of grid in there, so you have to be a bit careful about that. And the fact that these systems, which are very indicator based, might be a bit less robust going forward. So guys, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one.